Who Wants to Live Forever says you are the best YouTuber. That's fantastic. Oh wait, it has to be a question. You are the best YouTuber, aren't you? Yes, I am. Well, actually, I wish I were the best YouTuber. I aspire in a fantasy to get better and better at this instead of just kind of plateauing like I have. But we'll see. It would be nice to think of myself as the best YouTuber, but I don't actually think I am. Sorry. The Question Mark of God asks, congrats on getting things done. Well, I have gotten some things done, thanks. Okay, one question that you would be in a keen position to answer. In your opinion, what is the most erotic horror movie you have ever seen, and why do you think it fits that description? Well, this is a complicated question because I think that eroticism and horror go together like kibbles and bits. They belong together. But in practice, most erotic horror films to me aren't very erotic. There's, you know, this sort of softcore porn horror, you know, with copious amounts of nudity and what have you, which I'm all in favor of as far as it goes, but I feel like that option of having a lot of nudity or erotic material in a horror movie is an option that has not been well used by filmmakers who've had the chance to do it. You know, and you get these weird little pseudo-erotic things in horror movies that are really more successful in other ways, like in Reanimator or whatever. But generally, when I think of erotic horror films, I tend to think of films where it isn't so, where the eroticism is almost, it's more like sensuality. It's not specifically sexual. Even though I'm all in favor of that in horror films. You know, I tend to think of things like Rosemary's Baby, The Innocents, films that have an erotic content that's kind of built into the whole atmosphere. There's a film called The Blood on Satan's Claw that I'm a big fan of. It's not available in the US, but there's a British DVD of it, and I think a German DVD of it. What is this shit that's playing? I don't even... Oh. No, come on, people. I want something that... Okay, anyway, alright, so I'm going to move on here. I aspire to do some genuinely erotic horror films someday, and failing that, I will settle for softcore erotic horror, which is a cross between a horror film and softcore erotica, because that would be fun, and that's one of the things you get to do when you make low-budget movies that you don't really get to do in studio movies, because studio movies have pretty much closed the door on sexuality, on extreme erotica of one kind or another. I know that I have failed to really delve into that question. It's a good question, and it's a problematic subject that I am that I'm very interested in, but don't really have clear-cut answers for. Stratocasterz asks, why do people make these stupid question and answer videos? Well, you feel like you don't have anything to say, you don't know what to say, so you're going to ask people what they're interested in hearing, and then if you're me, you get into this situation that I'm in, where you know, I'm really dissatisfied with what I'm doing here, but you know, at least I'm doing a bad job, and I'm sorry. whereas someone like The Amazing Atheist really excels at just answering people's questions. So for some people it works real well, for others, like me, not so well. Darthdidious asks, what is your favorite sci-fi book? If you have one, is there a movie of it? If yes, did you enjoy the movie just as much, more or less, absolutely hated it? If there is no movie, would you like to see one made of it? Would you want to write the screenplay for it yourself? Do you feel you have the ability to do it justice? Yes, it's a bit of a multi-parter. Well, I don't have one favorite science fiction book, but for the purposes of this question, this multi-part question, I will, one particular book, one favorite book of mine, that I very much did want to see made into a movie, wanted to make into a movie myself, and that finally got made into a movie, was Robert Heinlein's The Puppet Masters. And when I first read that in like 1971 or 72, it was mind-bogglingly out there, even though it was already over 20 years old then. It was, I think it was published in 51 or 52. And I just thought this would make the most fantastic movie. You know, I was 13 or 14 then, and you know, I was just imagining the film, and it would just be this film like no film anyone had ever seen before. And that continued to be the case for decades. You know, if they had made, if a film version, a more or less faithful film version of The Puppet Masters had been made in the 70s or the 80s, it would have been groundbreaking. And into the beginning of the 90s, basically, the premises of the Puppet Masters started appearing in TV shows and other movies, you know, not necessarily stolen directly, but just basically these ideas that were more or less unprecedented at the time that I first read it, started becoming much more precedented in movies. And when they finally made a movie out of it, it was just a hideously disappointing pseudo X-Files kind of movie. It just couldn't have been more of a disappointment. I would recommend to anybody who likes science fiction to read The Puppet Masters by Robert Heinlein. I think it still holds up, but it's not remotely unprecedented. It has, you know, it's you know, it's basically a super secret government intelligence agency versus a secretive alien invasion of mind control parasites. And it's fantastic. It's just fantastic, and it was really unprecedented when it was written. Now it's just one of many things like itself, but it's still really good. So there. I wish I had had my chance to do it, but I don't. At this point, I don't think it needs to be made over, you know, to do it right, because I don't think that it really could be done right, and at this point, and it wouldn't have the impact that it would have had. So anyway, where are we now? It's 4:12 a.m. I don't know when I'm going to put these videos up. I'm not going to be able to put them up after recording them. I'll have to do it later. Let's see. TV Guitars asks, what is your favorite kind of music, and who are your favorite musicians? Also, do you think that the only way to get your foot in the door in the entertainment industry is to have lots of money or connections to people with lots of money? In other words, is talent the last thing that people in the industry are concerned about? No. Believe it or not, talent is not the last thing. That talent, people get very bitter about people who are successful and that they don't think deserve to be successful. But almost everyone who is successful, with the exception of the Paris Hiltons, is talented in one way or another. And even Paris Hilton is talented for a airheaded heiress who's famous just for being famous and having a sex tape. I mean, compared to others like her, she's got more charisma than they do. You know, so it's like, you know, more and more of the film and entertainment media has been carved out for people who are just famous for being famous, and people from other who've paid their way in or something, or been marketed in. But talent still outs, and ultimately you meet people with power and connections by having the talent, by showing the talent. Do stuff. Just do stuff. Just do stuff. As for my musical taste, it's just so huge. I'm 50, you know, and I actually got a late start on pop music, because when I was a kid in Malibu, we didn't have TV till I was like 8 years old, and the only albums we had were the ones my mom would bring home, and so I sort of picked up on 60s music in the 70s, and I sort of went directly from 60s music to edgy or alternative music in the 70s and 80s, and I sort of skipped the mainstream 70s, although now I like a certain amount of Eagles and things like that, although I hated the Eagles when they were a big band. They've grown on me over time. Van Morrison. The very first album I ever bought was Tea for the Tillerman by Cat Stevens, famous Muslim convert. He was not a Muslim at that time, he was a seeker. He was I guess a Greek Catholic of no particular faith, who was seeking, or of no particular belief in Christianity, who was like seeking for spiritual wisdom, and was like looking into Buddhism and things like that, and he ended up a Muslim, so go figure. It just goes to show how, going on a long search for spiritual wisdom can lead you to some funny conclusions. Fairport Convention, the Rolling Stones, Richard and Linda Thompson, Tom Verlaine, John Hyatt, Talking Heads, a billion other people that I can't think of like right now. 10,000 Maniacs, Natalie Merchant, U2, blah 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 blah. It goes on and on and on and on. Let's go on to a new song here. Not Frank Sinatra. Little Frank Sinatra goes a long way. Rolling Stones. Social Distortion. Born to Lose, my anthem.